believed God. It astounds me. And he brings Manasseh in his left hand to his father's right hand, and Ephraim his second-born in his right hand to his father's left hand. So Ephraim will get the lesser blessing. And Jacob is sitting there and he's going, oh, man. Just to think of what that meant. He crossed his hands and put the hand of blessing upon the second-born, Ephraim, and Joseph jumped back and said, wait a minute, Father, not so. You can't even withdraw it now. Manasseh's my son, even my firstborn. What did you do? Jacob says, I may be old. I'm not blind, and I ain't stupid. I know it, my son. The second birth always gets the blessing. You must be born again. Abel was second born, wasn't he? Ephraim was second born. Abraham was second born. Isaac was second born. Jacob was the second born. He came out of the womb second, and God said, I love Jacob and hated Esau. And Jacob means heel catcher or supplanter, one who trips up somebody else. And Jacob was a deceiver, and God says, I picked him to love and not Esau. I loved Jacob and hated Esau before they were born. And the second birth in Jesus was the second born in the flesh, because the Bible says, the Lord said, go to Pharaoh and tell Pharaoh, let my son go, for Israel is my son, even my firstborn. And they tried to offer the works of their hands, and Jesus was the second born of God in the flesh. But he was the only begotten of God, taken out of God himself. And Eve conceived and bare another in the place of Abel, the second born, whom Cain slew. And the third born was Seth, means substitute. And Seth was the substitute for Abel. And that became the custom among the Jews for the surviving son to carry on his brother's seed. And it started with Seth. So Seth was born to take the place of Abel. And when you see Seth's lineage in Genesis, the 5th chapter, that's Abel's lineage. In fact, Seth's lineage goes all the way down to Noah, Shem, all the way down to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob, or Israel, was Abel's descendant. That's what he was. Isn't that amazing? Well, like that. And then Israel slew Jesus, didn't they? Israel slew Jesus. Israel is the firstborn. Israel slew Jesus. Cain slew Abel. Cain offered the works of his hands. Didn't he? Offered his crops. He didn't offer any blood sacrifice. He went out and got some corn, some wheat, some greens, and took them to God and says, here's the works of my hands. Well, in Isaiah, the 2nd chapter, the Bible says Israel offered the works of their hands, that which their fingers hath wrought. And Israel killed Jesus, didn't they? It was the Pharisees that killed him. And he was second born. And Jesus offered blood sacrifice, didn't he? And Abel offered blood sacrifice, right? And Seth. Adam knew Eve his wife and conceived, and she bare Seth in the place of Abel, whom Cain slew. And God conceived and bare the church in the place of Jesus, whom Israel slew. Well, like that. And that's the truth. So the inheritance goes to Joseph through his son Ephraim, and all through the Old Testament. Ephraim. All through the Old Testament, northern Israel is referred to as Ephraim. Ephraim. Let me kind of move into prophecy here. Northern Israel is called Ephraim. Anytime you see Samaria, that's also northern Israel. And after Israel is split into two kingdoms, After it split into two kingdoms, another name for northern Israel is Joseph. Whenever Israel is spoken of as Joseph, that means northern Israel. This is after the kingdom split, after Saul. Of course, Saul went after, he didn't do the will of God, and then God says David will come from the tribe of Judah. He'll be my eternal king. And then Solomon, his son, will take over after him. And Solomon builds the temple, and Solomon allows his wives to go after Shemash and Molech and all of these sun and tree deities, which was brought into the church and eventually renamed Christ Mass or Christmas. And then God said, I'll split the kingdom. So he splits the kingdom into southern Judah and northern Israel. Well, of course, all this is the legitimate kings right here, except for Athaliah. She's a witch. That was Ahab and Jezebel's daughter who married Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, and she wanted Israel for herself, so she brought her idol gods that got involved. Northern Israel began this idolatry of Baal and the grove worship, and that's what prophecy's about. So whenever the Bible speaks of Ephraim had all of the inheritance there in Genesis 48. When Jacob put his right hand upon Ephraim, it went to Joseph through his second-born Ephraim. Ephraim had the inheritance. And then the fourth son of Jacob was Judah. And out of Judah, these were the fourth son of Jacob, Levi, and of course Simeon, and then Reuben, the firstborn. And these are sons of Jacob. And Jacob's name was changed to Israel. Israel, there in Genesis 32. So Joseph becomes, anywhere you find Ephraim, Joseph, Samaria, or after the split, after God divides the kingdom up, after the split, anytime you see Israel referred to, it's talking about northern Israel. So after the split, it's talking about Israel. So these are four titles. These are four titles for northern Israel after they become two nations because of Solomon's apostasy. And here's the true lineage of the kings, except for Athaliah. And she marries Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat. And she wants the kingdom, so she says she'll kill all of her grandkids. Her husband, Jehoram, died. Jehoshaphat's dead. Jehoram dies. Her son Ahaziah, who assumes the throne from Jehoram, he dies. She says, the kingdom is mine. I'll kill my grandkids and get it. Of course, one survives. The high priest takes him into the temple, gives him to the nurse. She takes care of him till he comes of age, and the high priest brings him out and says, God save Joash! And Athaliah cries, treachery. She's funny, isn't she? Athaliah is, I would say I'd want to talk to her when I get to heaven, but she's going to be in hell. I can't talk to her. That one, if anybody went to hell in the Old Testament, she did. Poor wicked woman. Kill all your grandkids so you can have the throne. I'll kill them all. You can't, I don't think that's one of the fruit of the Spirit, is it? No, that ain't one of the fruit of the Spirit. What a wicked woman. Now, so the inheritance goes to Ephraim, and the king comes out of Judah. Well, what this does, this splits, and of course the king comes out of Judah, and in southern Judah is Jerusalem, and that's where the throne is, and that's where the temple is. So that's where the king will be, won't it? It's got to come out of Judah. So Jesus comes out of this lineage, and when you go to the first chapter of Matthew, and you start with Zedekiah, you'll see the lineage goes all the way to Christ. He comes out of this lineage, except for her. She don't belong anywhere. And this lineage here are false kings. They had kings up here, but they're false kings. Now, if you'll notice, in the Bible, repeatedly, when the Bible, well, let me give you a couple of things, and this will lead us right into prophecy. This will lead us right into prophecy. Go over here to Hosea. Well, let's on the way. Let's stop at Isaiah. Isaiah, 28th chapter. Isaiah. I went someplace I didn't mean to go tonight. I meant to get back to Saul and David, but I'll get back to them. All right. 28th chapter of Isaiah. Now, remember, God tells Israel. He goes to Abraham there around 26